Hello class. So today we're going to be talking about the trigeminal nerve, specifically cranial nerve 5. And cranial nerve 5 is sometimes referred to as CNV. CN is cranial nerve and the V is the Roman numeral for 5. So if you see in the literature or in my PowerPoint CNV, I am talking about cranial nerve number 5, the trigeminal nerve. And then there are different branches of the trigeminal nerve. V1, so it's the letter V, which is the Roman numeral 5, and then the number 1. So V1 would be the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve. V2 would be the maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve, and V3 would be the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. So let's do a quick review of our central nervous system, specifically our brain and brain stem. Central nervous system consists of our brain and spinal column. The major regions of the brain are the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brain stem, which consists of the medulla pons and midbrain, and the diencephalon, which is our thalamus and hypothalamus. So the cerebrum is the largest portion of the brain. You can see it up here. This is our cerebrum, and it coordinates sensory data, motor functions, and many aspects of intelligence and reasoning. The cerebellum, which is down here, right here, is the second largest portion of the brain, and it produces muscle coordination, muscle tone and posture, and it coordinates balance. So the brain stem, we're getting down here to our brain stem. So the pons connects the medulla with the cerebellum and with higher brain centers. And cell bodies for cranial nerves 5, the trigeminal nerve, and 7, the facial nerve, are found in the pons. So what's a cell body? A cell body is a part of a neuron. Neuron consists of an axon, a cell body, and dendrites. And dendrites receive messages, the cell body processes them, axons deliver the messages through the wave of depolarization. So those are the neurons are kind of the building blocks of our nerves, and the cell bodies are just a part of a neuron. And the midbrain, so our midbrain includes a relay station for hearing, vision, and motor pathways. Superior to the brainstem, above our brainstem, the diencephalon primarily consists of the thalamus, which is a central relay station for nerve impulses, and the hypothalamus, which regulates homeostasis. So it basically links our nervous system, our nerves, with our endocrine system, which is our system of glands that release hormones and things like that. Our pituitary gland, our adrenal glands. So it sort of serves as like a go-between, our hypothalamus. And an important structure, just a little FYI, that contains nuclei involved in the regulation of sleep is actually our pons. So those are the areas of our brain: our cerebrum, our cerebellum, our brainstem, and our diencephalon. So here's a nice little lateral view of the trigeminal nerve, CNV, cranial nerve 5. It's the largest cranial nerve and, of course, the most important one to dentistry. It's a mixed nerve, or we can also think B for both, meaning it has a sensory component and a motor component. So it senses things. We can feel things with our teeth, our mucous membranes, our nasal cavity. If I sort of touch your face, you can feel me touch your face. And it also has a motor component, motor movement. So that's our muscles of mastication. Remember those, our masseter, our temporalis, our lateral and medial pterygoids. So let's go up here. So this is our trigeminal ganglion, which we'll talk about in a moment, and it's separating into V1, V2, and V3. Kind of makes sense Look at this, like the ophthalmic, it's kind of going towards our eye. I think of the ophthalmologist as my eye doctor. V2 is kind of heading down towards our nose, but also our maxilla. And then finally our mandible. Look at it down here, going right down here towards our mandible, that mandibular division. So, three main branches of the trigeminal nerve: the ophthalmic, V1, sensory only, superior orbital fissure. So it doesn't move our eyeball, it doesn't give us our lateral movements, our ability to look down, it doesn't give us vision. What it gives us is you're able to have the sense that I've just poked you in the eye, or you have an eyelash in your eye. So that's the sensory component of the ophthalmic division. Maxillary division V2 is also sensory only. It exits through the foramen rotundum, which is sort of our roundest foramen that we can view when we're looking at the interior view of the skull, the foramen rotundum. So it's very round, and when you think of someone, like if I'm feeling kind of rotund, I'm feeling kind of round in my belly. So it might be a good way to think of it. And then our mandibular division is sensory and motor. It helps us chew. And we can also feel, if you feel along the angle of your mandible and down on your face, you can sense that feeling, and that exits from our foramen ovale. And I think I didn't say which foramen the ophthalmic division exits out of, and that's our superior orbital fissure. So sometimes people like to make like a little mnemonic. So if you think SRO, which kind of means standing room only, it can also mean superior orbital fissure, rotundum, and ovale. So where does the trigeminal nerve originate? So it arises from the ventral surface of our pons. Now, ventral surface of our pons, ventral kind of means belly side or anterior, so it's coming out of the front side of the pons. And the nerves collect in a ganglion known as the semilunar or gasserian ganglion or trigeminal ganglion. So there's three separate names that it's known by, and you need to know all of those names. And what is a ganglion? A ganglion, when we're talking about nerves, is nothing more than a collection of cell bodies, those neuron cell bodies. So before it splits, before the trigeminal nerve splits into the three divisions, all the cell bodies of V1, V2, and V3 collect here in this ganglion. So this houses the cell bodies of the neurons for V1, V2, and V3 before it divides into the three branches. So the ophthalmic division, V1, this is what this Camtasia will be talking about. So it's the smallest division of the trigeminal nerve, sensory only, coming out of that superior orbital fissure. It has three main branches: the nasociliary, the frontal, and the lacrimal. Now, the nasociliary innervates our nasal mucosa, our ethmoid and sphenoid sinuses, the skin of our nose, and our eyeball. The frontal division of the ophthalmic division of V1 innervates the conjunctiva. Now the conjunctiva, you know when someone has conjunctivitis, their eye looks all runny and drippy and swollen. Our conjunctiva is kind of the mucous membrane that lines the inside of our eyelids, and it also covers the sclera or the whites of our eyes. So this mucous membrane or conjunctiva can get swollen. When someone has conjunctivitis, like their whole eyelids swell up, and it's because the inner lining is what's inflamed. So let me go on. The frontal conjunctiva, skin of the eyelid, mostly innervates the upper eyelid, the forehead, and part of the scalp. And then the frontal divides yet again into the supraorbital and the supratrochlear. And then finally we have the lacrimal division, and that innervates the lacrimal gland. So remember we kind of talked about a little bit in class, like power lines, right? How we get power. If a transformer is blown, the whole town goes out, right? If someone hits or, it snows and poles come down, then a neighborhood will go out. If you have, done something, just maybe on your street and you've hit a pole, sometimes it's just your house that goes out. And then finally, you can be blow drying your hair and just an outlet will go out. So just like big to small, it kind of happens the same way with these nerves, right? We have the brain, which is sort of our transformer that we don't want to go out. And then it divides. We have nerves that keep dividing and dividing and dividing, splitting off, innervating smaller and smaller areas. If that power line kind of makes sense, the trigeminal nerve is huge and it has a ton of branches, just kind of how like energy is transformed from the transformer to our neighborhoods, to our houses, to our outlets. So here are all like the individual, the smallest upon small branches of the ophthalmic division. We have the infratrochlear, the anterior ethmoid, the posterior ethmoid, the lacrimal, the supraorbital, the supratrochlear, and the nasociliary. So E and F, the supraorbital and the supratrochlear, are divisions of the frontal branch. The infratrochlea, the anterior ethmoid, the posterior ethmoid are all part or divisions of G, the nasociliary. So let's look here. Where's G? So here's G, and then E and F then branch off of G. And then finally we have the lacrimal, D. So here is the lacrimal branch. So here it is from a lateral view, that ophthalmic V1, and you can see how it kind of goes all around our eyeball, right? Here is the ganglion, which houses all those cell bodies, and here's the ophthalmic branch coming out of the superior orbital fissure. Look here, here's the maxillary division. Where is it coming out of? Oh, our foramen rotundum. And then finally our mandibular division, the foramen ovale. And we can see all the different lacrimal nerves, the infratrochlear, supratrochlear, supraorbital. But I would like you to know the three main branches, the frontal, the nasociliary, and the lacrimal are all divisions or smaller units of the ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal nerve. And then if you look here at this little image, kind of shows where one innervates, right? That forehead, the nose. This is probably a little bit off because it does the nose, but the bridge of the nose. It doesn't do the ala of the nose. All right, that's V2. Here it also shows it kind of innervates the lower eyelid. There's a little bit of cross innervation with that lower eyelid with V2 as well. So this isn't 100% correct, but it's the general region of where V1 innervates. So the lacrimal, that's actually the smallest branch. And it does the lacrimal gland, our conjunctiva, and the adjacent skin. So it's our tears. The frontal, which is composed of the supratrochlear and the supraorbital, upper eyelids, the middle of the forehead, the skin of the upper eyelids, the forehead again, the anterior scalp, and the frontal sinus, and the nasociliary. Lots of little divisions of the nasociliary. It's our eyeball, medial, middle of the eyelids, and the side of the nose, but not exactly the ala of the nose. The sinuses, frontal, ethmoid, and sphenoid sinuses, in the skin of the surface of the nose. So let's review it. Leaves the skull, V1, right? V1, cranial nerve 5, first division, ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve, leaves the skull through the superior orbital fissure, sensory only. It includes the nasociliary, the lacrimal, and the frontal branches. So if I asked you what are the 3 major branches of the ophthalmic nerve, I'd like you to be able to tell me that. And if the branch is sensory, motor, or mixed, again, we can say mixed or we can say both. Both is probably easier because when we do that mnemonic, my sister, my brother says, we can kind of figure out which of the cranial nerves, of the 12 cranial nerves, are sensory, motor, or both.